Republicans don't win if they don't cheat. That's the bottom line lesson to take away from the election results on November 4th. And what you saw on November 4th was a complete bloodbath when it comes to Republicans all over the country getting wiped out in their races. And roughly 1 year out from the midterm elections, this is a harbinger of things to come. And you can imagine that as these results were coming in from New York, from Pennsylvania, from Virginia, from Georgia, from California, from New Jersey, all of these races that were supposed to be much closer than what they were, they ended up being complete blowouts and decimations of Republicans up and down the ballot. And what you can guarantee is that as those results were coming in, a lot of ketchup bottles were flying in the White House. This was a complete and utter repudiation of everything that the Trump regime has tried to push forward since they took over in the beginning of this year. So while we can enjoy this victory, let's understand what's going to happen next. And you've seen the diapered orange dementia patient telegraph what his plans are in a recent address. He wants Senate Republicans to get rid of the filibuster and push through anything and everything possible so that he can centralize power. The goal for this regime, their billionaire backers, and all the Christo-fascist Nazi white nationalists is to have single party rule. And they want to install single party rule for the better part of the next 40 years so that they can get back to the roots of what they believe is the grand design of the United States. And the grand design, according to them, is a white Christo-fascist ethno-state. That's the goal that they're driving towards. So what we can expect from this point going forward into the midterms is all sorts of efforts by this regime, their lackeys in Congress, and the Supreme Court to do whatever it's possible to disenfranchise as many voters as possible to reduce turnout in advance of the midterms in 2026. Additionally, we can expect this regime to take policy actions that try to federalize elections at the state level. And the goal here for that is, regardless of what the results might indicate after the elections in 2026, they want everything to be in limbo so that they can fully execute the coup that they tried in January 6th and bring it to life in all future elections. So while all of us can be happy about the results that we got in the aftermath of the November elections, we need to understand that there is going to be a full court press, an all-out attack on voting and voter rights for the next 12 months. I can guarantee it. So what do we do about that? One of the things that needs to be central to our argument is this. We need to be berating and harassing every elected Republican and putting them on notice that they are going to be the targets of prosecution and imprisonment for enabling any and all illegal activities that this regime puts into place. We also need to make sure that we are loud and vocal in our message that continuing to support this regime is going to be the death of their political careers. There needs to be a price that is paid for continuing to support this regime and the vision that they're trying to bring forward. And every elected Republican needs to understand that. Because the one thing that we can be sure of about all politicians is that the only thing that they care about is maintaining power and having the ability to profit off of the system. So if nothing else, elected Republicans need to be forced to think about the impact of losing the gravy train that they're profiting off of. Those two things need to be a constant piece of how citizens of all stripes put pressure on elected Republicans going forward. Beyond that, the third thing that we need to focus on is imposing a financial punishment on any and all of the regime supporters. That means drastically scaling back on spending. That means opting out of as much as we can when it comes to the holiday spending season and making sure that we're using tools like Goods Unite Us to make smart buying decisions. We need to reduce our consumption as much as possible, because once the billionaires start noticing that their checks aren't coming in, that's going to exert pressure on the regime to shift course. Now, will they actually shift course? I don't think this regime has the brains or the balls to change course, because fundamentally they are cowards determined to maintain power, because they recognize the minute that they're out of power, they're likely going to be arrested and turned over to national or international authorities for prosecution. And that definitely needs to be on the table. The prospect and the promise of ruthless retribution and prosecution needs to be a central pillar for how every Democrat runs for office in the 2026 cycle. Any Democrat that is running for office needs to have central to their campaign a promise that they will prosecute every member of this regime, as well as every single member of the billionaire class that propped up this regime. That needs to be a rallying cry that every Democrat commits to, because it's way past the era where these billionaires and their puppets in government are escaping the consequences of their decisions, which are grinding the working class, the 90%, into dust. So let's take a breath and recognize that when we show up, the margins of victory is far beyond anything that they can engineer to their benefit. And we need to repeat that going forward. And we also need to recognize that the stakes have just been raised. This regime is going to punch back and punch back hard and do whatever they can to generate any sort of response from the citizens so that they can justify canceling elections, declaring martial law, doing whatever they can to prevent the 2026 midterms from happening. And we need to make sure that we're prepared for that and fight back now so that they don't even think about doing that. But understand, we are going to be facing some tough times. This is an administration that wants its people to starve because they believe it's going to be politically expedient for them. So when a regime is willing to starve its own citizenry to drive their political ends, you know that there is no limit to what they are willing to do to maintain power. When we look at the path forward, we need to be realistic about what to expect, and we need to make zero compromises on what the goal is. And as we move forward to a year from now where midterms are going to be taking place, let's understand that there's going to be a concerted effort that is designed to splinter and split anyone that isn't part of the white nationalist crowd. And we need to make sure that we are holding together for the shared purpose of knocking these Nazis out of power.